Can you state your full name for us, sir?
I am Eugene T. Shawaryn. I go by the name of Tim.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the city of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania.
What was life back then? Oh.
What was life like back then?
How do I correct that? Do I just repeat it?
Yeah, just repeat it.
Sorry. What was life like back then?
Well, when I was growing up, this was about 1936, 37. It was a Depression era. We didn't have much food, clothing, but we survived.
When did you do in the service? It says, when did you do in the, sorry.
I'm sorry with my grammar. So go ahead and look at it and repeat the question.
What did you do in the service?
In the service, I was in the engineer section of the Marine Corps.
What conflicts did you take part in?
I landed on the island of Tarawa, first wave. I landed on Saipan, and I also landed on Tinian, 3 combat.
What were you doing when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor?
I was stationed in Philadelphia Navy Yard, and it was a Sunday, and I was at a theater, and the theater interrupted the show. It was about 4 or 5 o'clock, and they reported that all the 4th Naval District report back to their bases, and I left the theater, and policemen outside in an automobile took me down to the Philadelphia Navy Yard where I was stationed.
Wow. With what units did you serve?
I served with the with the 2nd Engineer Battalion, the 2nd Marine Division. I served with the 2nd Separate Engineer Battalion and a 1st Separate Engineer Battalion.
Which theater of war were you in?
Pacific Theater.
Which battles did you take part in?
Tarawa, Saipan, and Tinian.
What specific details do you remember about combat, sights, sounds, and what you saw?
When we landed on Tarawa, you could not explain the shrapnel, the noise, the explosions on coming into Tarawa. I landed on the first wave. On the M tracks, some of the M tracks were direct hits. The Japanese were awful accurate in their artillery, and a lot of the M tracks did not get in. The other waves never did get in because there wasn't enough M tracks and they had to wade in. That was the most harrowing experience that I think I've ever went through.
I don't know if that's okay. What was the worst moment?
That was the worst moment.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna Tell me. Oh, sorry.
Well, to go, we made our landing. I got onto the beach, and our Sergeant Goodday and Moon and I seen a Amtrak come in, or a Sherman tank come in called China Girl. And China Girl starts with a C, so all the tanks of the C Company were named after, starting with letter C. China Girl, Colorado, and so forth. We seen China Girl coming in, so we ran to help it, possibly to blow out part of the wall so it could get inside the island. And as we were running toward the tank, the mortar shell landed between Sergeant Goodday and me. He got hit in the jugular vein. I got hit in the knee. He was hit pretty bad, so I bandaged him up, and I crawled back to the wall until a corpsman came over and bandaged me, and I went back to the ship.
Wow. I don't know what question I just read.
What's that?
I don't know what question I just read.
You're right here. Right there.
Tell me.
Number 11.
Okay. Tell me about the chaos of war, and did you know where the enemy were?
Go ahead.
Well,
the question again. Do you know where the enemy was at all times? Did you know what was really going on?
You never knew where the enemy was. You had to search him out. They would make their counterattacks, then you knew where they were at. And in our case, as being flamethrower demolition, then their case was to, if the front lines were held up due to a machine gun nest, pillbox, or a cave, something like that, they would call onto my team to either blow it up or burn them out with the flamethrowers. But that's the only way. But they would be hidden. They would be in the brush. You couldn't see them. You'd have to find them.
Wow. Did you always know what your objective was?
As a team leader, we were assigned to someone in headquarters on the front lines, reserve. And as the front lines needed our specialty, they would call on us to go up, so we didn't know where we would be at any time.
How did you feel towards the people you fought?
At the time we were fighting them, of course, we heard a lot of the rumors where they would try to give up and they would have booby traps on them. They would blow the Marines up, and that was on Guadalcanal. So we were quite wary of, you know, how they would, you know, come in to give themselves up. They did not want to give themselves up. We witnessed that on Saipan and Tinian, which they jumped off the cliffs, made banzai attacks with sticks, and they had no way of winning, and they would still go to the end. They would not give up.
What were some of the cultural differences you saw when you first went overseas?
Well, I was down in New Zealand. We were down in New Zealand training for about a year, so we seen the Maori Indians down there and the culture that they have down there. They're probably, New Zealanders were about 30 years behind the United States in their culture. On the islands, we've seen Chamorros on Guam, on Saipan, the Spanish-speaking people. And the Japanese, of course, we didn't see them unless we captured them.
Mm. What did you miss most from home while you were overseas?
Well, I went in the Marine Corps before the war, about a year and a half before the war. I seen the war coming in. My mind was set to in the Marine Corps, and the home thing didn't bother me that much. I think if I was drafted, something like that, I would have a different outlook. Mm-hmm. But that's what I wanted to do.
Good. After the war was over, was it easy to put the experience behind you?
Yes, no problem at all.
Wow. What do we need to remember about World War II?
You need history classes to understand what happened during the war. First World War, when I grew up, there was very little said about it in schools, and you don't have that today, I don't think. You know very little about even the conflicts they had in Korea or in Vietnam. And I think that's a shame, because the more you know about it, the more you see how fruitless a war is. There's no reason to have a war.
Mm-hmm. What differences do you see between your generation and the generation of today?
Well, the generation today, I think they're a lot smarter than what we were when we grew up. We didn't have all the facilities that you have today, all the electronics, computer, and the information that you can get to. All we had maybe was a dictionary. Oh. We had no encyclopedia, just a dictionary to go back to see what we have. Today you have all of that at your hands.
All right, I see, Mr. Shawaryn, that you have 2 Purple Hearts.
Yes, sir.
When was the second time you were wounded?
I was wounded when we took Mount Tapashaw. That was on Saipan. We went up there at nighttime, and when we got up there, there was no problem. You couldn't dig in because the island was all pinnacles and coral rock, so you can't dig. It's not dirt. And about 11 o'clock at night, the Japs came back up there, and we had a firefight up there. That wasn't bad, all right? Then the next morning, we found about 18 dead Japanese, and right below us, which was a cliff about 10, 12 feet below us. And I guess about 3 days we went out on patrol, and only patrol that they took the engineers out because the infantry didn't have that many men. So they needed about 11 men to go on patrol, and they only have about 5, 6, so they filled in with my flamethrower demolition team. So I went out on patrol, and that's when we hit into a grenade attack by the Japanese. My carbine was shattered, and I got wounded in my hand.
Okay. With being on base or Tarawa, that's in Marine Corps history. That's probably, one of the more famous more famous battles, and something that's gone down in the Marine Corps history. How do you feel being part of that battle?
Well, let me put it this way: it's nice that you went through something like that. We lost over about 1,000 that never came back. So that's the thing that is back in your mind. We had over 1,000 that maybe 2,000 were wounded on that island. And there are things that you think about. You don't think about the glory part of it. And I've been to 2nd Marine Division reunions and their birthday parties in Washington, Camp Lejeune. And I see the Marines that come back from Iraq, and I look at them, and I thought, my gosh, that's what I looked like when I was over there. I think I was about 19, 20 years old, and they're doing a wonderful job. What I done, I wouldn't trade for the world, and they're doing a wonderful job today. And when I see them and they see me, they think I'm God. Because what they're doing, they follow with what we had done. And we paved a path for them that, you can do it. Yeah.
When you went from Tarawa, so you got wounded pretty early on in the battle, and
right.
If you had stayed, it was a different kind of battle than, let's say, Tinian and Saipan.
Right.
Those are longer, and I'm not sure exactly how long they were. What was the pace of battle? Was it always go ahead?
No. The Tarawa campaign, we had to establish a beachhead. Now they had Red Beach 1, 2, and 3. As we landed, the Red Beach 1 was called Bird's Beak, was on the right. That was 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marine Regiment. The center section was 2nd Battalion, 2nd Regiment, which was a cove. And the 3rd Red Beach 3 was the 8th Marines landed there, and that was to the left of the wharf that they had, a pier going out through the cove to the coral rock out to deep water where a ship can come in and unload. When we landed, the Red Beach 2, when they came into a cove, so they had fire coming from both sides and the front. So they veered over to the Red Beach 1. That was our sector. Now, most of them got really wiped out, but those that did got into Red Beach 1. Red Beach 1 with Major Kyle continued on across that part of the island, and that island had a Red Beach Green, which we never thought of landing at. But he went across the island, and everything was held up right on the beach other than that. The cove area has none of the Marines were in that area. The Red Beach 3, Shoup, Major Colonel Shoup landed there, and they were in pretty good shape. They'd done most of the attacking from that point. They hit most of the Japanese at that point. They were real fortified. Well, they were fortified throughout the entire island. We went, after we landed, we put all our equipment in a wall, and we went over the wall into the front lines. There was nothing there. The fellow before me that went into the wall was shot right through the head. I jumped up, I shot the Japanese. It was in a trench right there. And Goudet and I went up to the front lines. There was nothing there, so we returned back to the beach, and that's when we seen a China girl. But that was the first day. Now the second day, I wasn't there, but the second day they made advances, and the second day since the Green Beach was open, and Kyle opened that beach, they brought in the 6th Marine Regiment that landed at that beach, and it went right down the island. The battle lasted for 72 hours, and we had over 1,000 killed and 2,000 wounded.
Didn't the general of the commanding general of the Japanese say that it would take 10,000 men and 1,000 years to take Tarawa?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
And you guys
it does 72 hours.
You guys took it in 3 days. That's fantastic.
Yes, right. And we only took about 17 prisoners. It wasn't their fault. They committed suicide, and they just wouldn't give up. Yeah.
When you were on Tinian and Saipan, Tinian is something that most people don't know anything about. What was life like on Tinian?
Tinian was, well, on Tinian, the assault troops went on M-tracks from Saipan right into Tinian. We were reserved, 2nd Division was reserved, and we were on a ship. So we made a feint attack to the town of Tinian, and they had the battleship there, the Colorado. Talking about how accurate the Japs were, they fired on that battleship, and they had about 20 hits on it. They hit a destroyer, they hit a destroyer. They were very accurate. And the Marines aboard the battleship and the Navy, they lost over 250 men and about 32 Marines. Now, after that, we circled around. We made our landing at the other part of the island. Meanwhile, the 4th Division was moving up on their part of the island on the right side, and the 2nd Division went on the left side. It was a model operation. We went through it. The artillery was, the 155s were firing from Saipan, giving us cover fire. We seen liberators coming over, dropping bombs in front of us. Fighters would come in with their rockets right in front of us. And at that time, all the rocket-propelled ammunition they had, the wings, the fins would fall out, and these things would tumble right into our lines. The 105s, 155s, shells would land into our lines, and we'd have to put up a red smoke to stop the firing. So, but other than that, it was really a model operation. Very, very good.
Can you tell us about the Presidential Unit Citation you received?
Presidential Unit Citation was on landing on Tarawa. There was only a point that we done it in 72 hours, and listening to the Japanese that we couldn't take it over 100 years, which we done in 72 hours, which was a big thing. The people back in the United States really deplored the fact that we lost so many Marines for such a small island. And that island was, they needed it because the Japanese were using it as a landing strip to bomb our forces, you know, from that point on. What we learned from it was that the next operations landing, that was the first frontal attack that the Marine Corps ever done. The only one in history before that was the New Zealand and Australian troops that landed on Gallipoli. All right, so they never did land, but we did, and from that we learned from it. And the next operation was at Kwajalein, was a lot easier, and then on to Saipan, Tinian, and all the other islands.
It's amazing. So were you, Tinian was your last battle that you were in?
Correct.
Did you get out of the Marine Corps at that time?
No. On that, I was attached to the 8th. The combat on Tinian, we landed on the 15th, and the combat was done on about the August 2nd or 3rd. I stayed on the island to August 8th, and I took my team, the only team, back to Saipan. We went back to Saipan. At Saipan, I was sent home on a twice wounded naval policy at that time, and that was like in September '44.
Did you make the Marine Corps career after that?
No, I didn't. I was a regular Marine, so I enlisted in 1940 for 4 years, and I was in Saipan. My 4 years was up, and I couldn't, of course, get out, so I didn't want to go what was called COG at that time, and it was called Convenience of the Government, and that was a reserve classification. I wanted to make a decision whether I wanted to stay in the Marine Corps or not, so I extended my enlistment 2 years. And that's how I stayed till 2 years, from 1944 to 1946. And that was like a year and a half after the war ended.
From what I hear from World War II vets, my grandfather I had both my grandfathers in World War II. My last name's Hines, so on my father's side, he was fighting for the other side at that time. But my other grandfather, who fought for the Americans, still, until the day he died, did not trust the Japanese.
No, I'm
sorry.
I landed on Saipan. Of course, we abhorred the Japanese, all right, because we were fighting them. But I landed on the occupation of Japan in it was September 25th, and we landed on the town of Sasebo. We didn't see any woman around. We went right through the town, took the whole battalion company through the town and all. I took working parties through Japan. I ran a road grader through Japan. I went from Sasebo all the way up to Fukuoka, through the little towns, and I see all the natives, all the Japanese, the women, the children, and they were wonderful. They were no different than their children back home. They would be with you, they'd smile with you, they'd, talk to you as much as they could. They'd say Ohio, which was say hello, and we conversed with them. It was real, real nice.
From what I read with General MacArthur and his occupation of Japan, did you kind of feel that the Japanese culture was like he admired it? How did you feel about the Japanese culture?
Well, I wasn't there that long. I landed on the 25th of September, and I left December 30th, 31st. The culture, of course, is they're mostly farmers, that I seen. As MacArthur, I never did care for MacArthur, but with what he done in Japan, I thought he was great. He was great.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with us about your experience?
Well, I left Japan end of December. I landed in China, in Tientsin, China, and there I was more fearful in China than I was in Japan, because you had the communists were coming down into that area, and we were building an ammo dump there, and the ammo dump would be raided by the Chinese communists for the ammunition, and we had firefights over there which nobody knows about. We lost Marines over there, yes.
So how long were you over in China?
Well, from till I guess it was about 6 months. That was 45, and the 45 I went there. That was beginning of 46, and May 46 I left China. That was about 5-6 months.
So how did you feel about the communist government there that was taking over?
We were still under the nationalist government. Okay. We had nothing to do with the communists other than meeting them and fighting them. or they would capture some of our Marines and we'd have to go back after them, things like that. We'd get them back, but no, we had nothing to do with them.
Interesting. I had no idea.
Yes, right.
I don't have any more questions as of yet. Is there? I mean, is there anything other than that you'd like to add or share with us?
Well, you often hear about Marines and China Marines, and you say China Marines had a good life. Well, let me tell you, we did have a good life. Like the money exchange was that they had two money systems here. One is Chinese CNC, China National Currency, and Kuomintang currency. The China National Currency was about $700 to $1 American. The Kuomintang money was about 36,000 to 1, right? Now, to us, that was great. I have pictures where little children there, shoe shine boys, they got piles of money around them with a shoe shine cost maybe a nickel, and to us it would be like $500 that we ship out to them, and that was it. But we lived good over there. We'd go into the British concession had a section, the Japanese section had a French, Belgium. Everyone that tints in China had a concession. The Belgian concession, they ran the tram system. The British concession, we'd go into British concession, they'd have beautiful hotels. The Astor Hotel, you go in there for dinner and they'd have up in a loft, they'd have musicians there playing, songs, and they'd put you in a little room, isolate you from the people because you were a Marine, and they'd give you about an 10 course dinner. And you just sit there and you wait for another course to come, then another course. In between courses, they give you spumoni or something to lick your palate. But they were very educated and top of the line. Very, very nice.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's all we have for you today.
Well, good.